Okay, everyone, we are ready to go. Thank you very much for joining us for our panel discussion on innovations in base defense operations. I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves. My name is Alicia Linehan. I will be your moderator today, coming to you from New Orleans, Louisiana. So other panelists, would you like to introduce yourselves briefly?
Sure. My name's Toby Houchens. I'm the founder and CEO of Recon. We're a risk intelligence and risk management software platform using emerging data science. My background is I was a former Green Beret for 11 years, got a background in neuroscience, currently just over halfway through a doctorate in big data analytics, and also wrote the standards and guidelines for ESRM on behalf of ACES, which was just released in September in Chicago at the Global Security Exchange. So obviously really interested in advancing security. I speak about security innovations in technology and risk technology all over the world, and happy to be here.
Great, thank you. All right, John?
I'm John Halsema. I'm the Chief Technology Officer and Chief Operating Officer for Ares Security. We do modeling and simulation, build models, digital twins of Air Force bases. We've done several of them. We model various attacks on the bases in a modeling and simulation engine and compute quantitative metrics of performance. We also have command and control systems that use that information to help provide situational awareness and real-time responsiveness for Air Force personnel that are responding to emergency events. And then we use that same model again in training systems that provide command and control training and first-person shooter training to Air Force personnel.
And Andrew?
Hi, I'm Andy with LufCo, and we are a NSA contractor that does a lot with intel collection systems and development of big data systems. Today, we're talking about Shot Alert, which is our passion project, taking all those lessons learned from NSA and concentrating on turning every microphone into a shot detection system.
So our panelists are here. They're going to answer a couple of thought-provoking questions from me, and then we're going to open it up. Most of you are aware of the Q&A button down at the bottom of your Zoom window. So if you have any questions at all during this time, you can type them in, and I will read some of them if we have some time at the end of our already pre-described questions that I'm going to ask. So I'm going to start with some basics. How can security forces in the base of the future be assured that they are ready for a serious attack against USAF assets and personnel? So who would like to start? Each of you can answer that.
I'll start. The first thing that obviously we need to do is we need intelligence, and we need to know what the threats look like. Once we have that information, we know what the threat is, what the target sets are, and what the risk is. We can run a number of algorithms. Modeling and simulation is one that we do with Monte Carlo simulations, and we can quantifiably quantify what the risk to a particular target is based on what the threat is. Once we have that information, we can start making really informed decisions about how to respond and also what we do to mitigate this attack or the probability of success of this attack. So instead of just having SMEs, which is the historical method, we use SMEs to look at these things, use their judgment of many years of experience to decide what to do. We can now quantify this, we can measure it, and we can assess both the likelihood of an attack and the likelihood of the success of an attack, and then what strategies we should employ to mitigate that risk.
Yeah, just to piggyback, obviously, I agree with all of what John said. Moving in the future, we need to be able to detect emerging threats, the ones that we don't know yet, to try to break down the unknown unknowns as quickly as possible. And that involves being able to incorporate sensors and being able to use that data that comes in there effectively by using data science as one method to be able to make sense of it. The other thing is starting to think about gaps and where those gaps exist. Usually they're in silos between components, between domains, between different groups, whether they be security forces or, the head shed or the operations, and start to look at the threats that overlap across different assets, because that's something that doesn't get done a lot, even in the private sector. You're looking at threats in a vacuum, and you're looking at them through a silo as they impact, particular assets, when a lot of threats have overlap in a lot of different operations and a lot of what you're doing. And, the last thing I'll say is, being able to empower and create a security culture with training and collection and with intelligence, to be able to make sure that every person that's in that organization, every security guard, every manager, every civilian, every airman and woman, is able to, report different early indications of threats and risks, because there's a lot of data that's out there that gets, that's just lost, and nobody's reporting it, nobody's consuming it, and there's a lot of eyeballs out there. We are the best sensors that are out there, human beings. So being able to use that sensor effectively, I think, is going to be a game changer, and to help eliminate a lot of the emerging threats that are, or at least help to manage some of the emerging threats that are coming.
Okay.
Yeah, and from our standpoint, from the shuttle standpoint, we're really focusing on, when an event's actually happening. So we realize that, the best battle plans are usually thrown away with the first engagement of the enemy. So although, planning and all that stuff is great, in order for that to actually come together from the standpoint of being effective, that means that your enemy has to be involved with your plan so he knows what to do, that your people being attacked need to be involved with your plan so they know what to do, and the people responding need to be involved with the plan so they know what to do during an event. And when you have all those three knobs that are constantly turning, the one thing that is true in all that is, during an event or an attack, right, it's absolute chaos. And there is no prescribed plan to handle that. So our approach is really about, better collection that's completely low swap C, that runs on every device that's there in the right spot. Because as we look at trying to protect a large geographical area or an office building or whatever it might be, having sensors ready for an attack is slightly improbable because of maintenance and logistics stuff. So turning everything into a sensor is the best way to do things, and that gives the information to the first responder the best. So, they're the ones that are preparing. They're the ones that, when they have to fall down to the lowest common denominator of training, can kick in, and they can come protect, the folks that are doing their best, in the middle of that chaos.
Okay. We have one question from Russ Baker. I believe it's for John. How are you using advanced 3D visualization techniques for M&S and C2 for situational awareness?
So the bases we built, both Dias and Travis, the digital twin we built for them, is a 3D model. And we use the geo-based data that they already had. Now, we had to make some modifications to it and get some additional data, but that's what we did. And in a few weeks, we had a complete 3D model. When we build these things, we build them in an open standard called Collada, so it can be imported into all kinds of other model systems. Now, once that's developed, you have a complete visualization of the base that you can use a 3D modeling engine to review, but we also tie that to high fidelity virtual reality systems. So with just a little bit of additional work, we're able to do things like put on a set of 3D goggles. We use the Vive Pros because the Air Force liked those for flight simulators, and wander around a facility and look at it in full 3D detail. In the C2 side of it, the same thing. If you had an event that's occurring and you can't respond, or you can't really train in that facility, like the clinics and the hospitals, you can't have defenders running around with guns inside of them. So we take that model, we incorporate that into a full 3D immersive reality system where we can practice and it looks like they're in the real facility. So we have those types of technologies we employ across the spectrum, from just being on your screen, a 3D model like you would see right now on any screen that you can slice and dice and look into and rotate, look in different directions, to the goggle type of technology, which is fully immersive and looks like you're really there. When you turn, you see what you would really see if you were in that location.
So our next question is, how can security forces in the base of the future train and be mentally ready for a rare but potentially deadly attack?
Actually, so what I just said is part of that, actually.
Okay.
So we take that 3D model and we'll greatly enhance it. So for modeling and simulation, all we care about perhaps is, can I shoot through this wall? Can I see through this glass? Can I use a weapon or a detector or a sensor, any type of sensor? Can it work in that environment? But we can enhance that model a little bit. And we did that for 2 of the hospitals. Where again, they can't run around with guns and deal with an active shooter scenario in the real hospital, but we make it photorealistic. So it looks like you're there in the hospital, you know where you are, you can look at signs and orient yourself. So it's across that spectrum of preparation, using the tools that we have and not building different model for every tool. They have to be tweaked, but a common digital twin that lets us use those models and train and help the responders become familiar with that environment.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, a big important part of intelligence is the dissemination and making it actionable. So you can receive all of the information, all the early warning, you can understand the exposure, you can understand the threat, but unless you have built a security program that makes use of the technologies that you're using and that has buy-in from the whole organization, from the whole base, you're really always going to be leaving meat on the bone. So it's important to make sure that training and a robust security program that overlaps different domains is set up and tested and continually practiced. But the more complicated you make things, the less likely you're going to get buy-in and usage, and you're going to end up having some really nice technology that doesn't get used. So the main thing is to make sure that the technology is supporting the program, and that you have a good, robust program that you're practicing, because a lot of these emerging threats, if you don't get the information to the right place at the right time in the right format, and you don't have a way of acting on that, and you haven't practiced that, you don't have the programs in place, the intelligence is less valuable.
Right, and on that same kind of note, I mean, when you have these really expensive systems that are deployed everywhere, the fact that they'd be in the right place at the right time when a assailant, is happening, right? When a situation is happening is extremely low case scenario, very much black swan. So, our concept, again, our approach to that is commodity-based sensors for everything that's out there that's actually already existing, and using that to get the best intelligence to first responders. So.
Okay, great. We have another question from the audience from Rebecca. She says, in a fiscally constrained environment, do you think improving the security of individual buildings on a base would improve overall security, or would it be more effective to improve the base's perimeter security instead?
Let me take a poke at that one here real quick.
Okay.
Again, I'm coming at it from the aspect of a very specialized sensor, one that doesn't require unique hardware. We have these things on our bodies called cell phones that are constantly listening to everything that we're doing all the time, right? You have your wake words, your OK Googles, your Siris. Our approach was to use a wake word, but to have that wake word be a explosion through a barrel like a gunshot, and then use that same type of voice processing and audio processing to create a very accurate impression of what's going on in that, around that person, almost like a shot detection bubble, if you will. So instead of trying to deploy a $30 million, or $15 million system, to cover a bunch of buildings, this is something that just runs on everyone's cell phone in the background and is no more intrusive or invasive than the applications that are there today. So our research has shown that this is very, very useful and doesn't require any specialized training on anybody. And it, at the end of the day, it can put a dot on a map for any one of these other two vendors here on the call as well. So it makes a lot of sense, right? Cost, gunshot detection.
Yeah, and to further elaborate on the cost issue, there's cost, and then there's the cost of implementation, the opportunity cost. So there's a lot of software systems out there that do a lot of great things, but if they require an FSR, field service representative, or it takes a lot of training, now you're taking a little bit of the efficiency and a little bit of the value away from that technology. So we believe that technology has to be easy to use. It has to be adaptable. It has to be built on, information that's salient. It has to have a low cost threshold. And that's the idea, because you can beef up the outer perimeter or, the inner, buildings or your forces that are deployed or out in the city outside of the post. I mean, they're all targets and they have different vulnerability profiles and victimology profiles based on where they're at. So, your best line of defense is getting the intelligence and getting early warning as much as you can, having good training programs, and then being able to disseminate that, because that's kind of where you're going to have the lower cost. A lot of the kind of the hardware type of solutions that are out there are going to be really expensive, and you really got to, be able to decide whether it's worth what you're spending. And the other aspect of this is some of the more intelligent systems right now that are being developed and that we're also developing are being able to measure the cost effectiveness of your security program in the first place, right? Because one of the things that security professionals, at least in the private sector, are really afraid of is the more you measure what they're doing and what the impact of what they're doing has on their security program, on their budget, on outcomes. Now there's a chance for them to fail. Historically, security has been one of those things where if something doesn't happen, then you're successful. If it does, you're not. But there's a lot of different, there's more nuanced analyses that you can do as far as changes in exposure over time, and changes in, threat profiles, how your mitigations and your management, how you're managing that risk or removing that risk impacts your overall security program, so that you can start to look at optimal budgets for the right security solutions across the base. And in that way, you can start to use, make data-driven decisions as opposed to just kind of putting your finger in the air and, buying whatever the newest toy is. You got to start looking at what is the value and what is it actually what is the impact on your security program and on your risk management programs.
Did you have anything to add to that?
So one, I think the answer is it depends, and you need to measure it, and you need a quantitative way to measure it. I think that, and that's been the focus and what ARES has been working on. But the other piece in constrained environment is you have to get the biggest bang for the buck. Overused term, but it's a great term. And so your responders that you have available at any given moment of time on a facility, you need to strengthen their hand and give them technology that leverages their ability to be able to handle these things. And that, I think that is much more real-time command and control, situational awareness, where today they're using paper, pens, and handheld radios to do a lot of this in their memories. On the, I could take a quick shot at the next question too.
Sure.
In that part of it, what's that?
Do you want to read it out loud so they can?
Yes. How do you see SUAS and counter UAS playing into base security? I think that's a huge area of concern right now. One of the areas that I've worked on recently is how effective are some of these near-term solutions that have been deployed on Air Force bases. And the answer when we measured it is they're not effective at all. And so we actually did get nearly zero effectiveness of these systems that are currently being deployed with this technology. And what that really means is we need better intel on how they're going to use them, and we need better countermeasures for their use. In UAS themselves, this can be this is one of the enabling technologies that can make the existing defenders much more effective and leverage their ability to be more effective. But that needs to be considered in the measurement of the response and the security system, a quantitative measure of it.
Great. All right, I believe we have time for one more question. And this one is from Casey Murphy. With the increased attack surface due to the increasing number of diversity of embedded IoT devices in the base of the future, how is this risk being mitigated? For example, data security of security cameras, increasingly networked devices, and movement to the cloud, etc.
Well, that's a really, really big question. I'll actually take my shot alert hat off and put my NSA contractor hat on for this one.
Okay.
And that is, you know, you have to really weigh the risk of what these devices are doing for you and make sure there's a process and policy in place before adding these devices to your network in general. You know, there's with the CMMC that's coming out for all defense contractors that have to adhere to that, and having those same regulations and policies being part of all the ATO and SSP kind of work that we do day in, day out for, you know, securing DoD systems. I mean, cyber hygiene is probably still the number one part of trying to protect the actual infrastructure itself when it comes to all these different devices. So, you know, good cyber hygiene, you know, a good decision-making process on what that device is doing when it's attached to the network, and then, you know, making sure that you understand where your attack vectors are and monitoring those in a way that not only supports competency in trying to defend, but also understanding, you know, kind of what the adversary has to gain by exfil and access as well. So, you know, complex question there.
Yes.
Yeah, and my response to that is, you know, just to piggyback on that, I'm going to focus on a different angle, and that is the human side of that. So what does that mean when you have an increased attack surface? You have more vulnerabilities, and where do those vulnerabilities come from, and what are the main ones when you're talking about cyber risk? It's usually humans, right? There's a lot of abstracted counter cyber methods. The cloud environment has become very secure. Unless you're state sponsored or you're really good, you know, it's very hard to get into these things. But, you know, not to downplay it, you definitely have to have systems in place and think through it when you're doing these integrations, and make sure, you know, the buck is worth the bang is worth the buck. So, but what people fail to look at is the other side of this vulnerability, the human side. Now there's more training that has to happen. There's more, which now is opportunity cost. So you now need to make sure that when you're using these new tools, these new devices, these new integrations, these new sensors, these new analytical layers, you now have to train people on, you know, some of the vulnerabilities there. So there's an added training component of this to make sure that human risk is not overcoming some of the benefits there and creating more problems. So with any good technology, like I said, you know, good programs and good training and goes hand in hand, so that you're not making a bad situation worse by adding more technology.
John, did you want to give us a last thought?
Sure. I think it's really important to understand what the risk of a successful attack is. You have to assume that our networks were never designed from the ground up to be secured, and that's just the way it is. That's something we have to deal with. So we put layers and layers of security around them. But as we go into more commercial IoT type sensors, that provides great value. But I think you have to realistically understand that an air gap doesn't even mean anything when you have an external sensor, because I can communicate with for example, a video sensor with a laser, and I can trigger abnormal or undesired behavior in that video sensor with that laser. So the whole supply chain management and control of those devices, and right now, if we want to leverage the availability of commercial devices, which gives us big bang for the buck, we have to look at what's the risk if they got into it. And we have to have a mitigation strategy, assuming for perhaps they do get into the video management system through the cameras. All right, that's bad. But if I can immediately firewall that off and prevent it from spreading to the rest of my systems, I can make a risk analysis, a risk-informed decision. Do I get the value by going with these commercial cameras and protect my network via another mechanism? Or do I pay really premium dollars to have specially built video systems that are configured for a DoD specific market? And that's a risk-informed decision you have to make.
And one quick thing, Alicia, on that. The other side of that is you don't want to silo yourself into paralysis, because that's the other aspect of it. So if you add so many security layers and you make it so difficult, guess what? Your operational capacity and what you're able to do, you know, with the technology is now reduced. So you have to look sometimes, depending on whether you're talking about white, gray, or black operations, where that information, if you have everything in black and it's siloed and it's locked down and nobody can use it, well, then you're not getting the benefit of it. So you have to also do that kind of analysis. You know, when you want to use something, are you able to, is it able to reach out and touch and communicate with people, or is it so locked down that it's impossible to use and you're losing the benefit of it in the first place? So make sure that, you know, maybe you have to have redundant systems with varying levels of security for different operations so that you can still use those things. In fact, that's a large reason why some of the DoD clients are interested in what we're doing, is because you can use it across, you know, different silos, and that's the idea. It's not everything is going to be locked down, or is going to, or should be locked down completely.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. We're out of time. They're starting back up on the main website, and I will share our contact information again. And everyone have a great rest of your day. Thank you.